I want people to realize it's nothing wrong with them. It's a physiological response in the body, and it can't be completely controlled. There are things they can do to work past it and or to work with it, but it's going to happen in a lot of situations.
I'd like to welcome back Dr. David Powers to our show. Dave is a founding member of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, a decorated U.S. Marine Corps and U.S. Army veteran. He is a distinguished member and diplomat of the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress and a board certified expert in traumatic stress and emergency crisis response. I asked Dave to come back and share with us his knowledge and experience on handling stressful situations and what small steps we can do to overcome those challenges that will lead to big wins in the future. Dave, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so let's set it up. We've all had that experience where you have a situation, you get really nervous, maybe your body shakes or your face is flushed. You either say something that you didn't want to or make a decision that you later regret. And if you're like me, that scenario has played out more than once in my life. Those experiences left me feeling hopeless because I didn't have a framework for dealing with them. And I know what Dave is going to talk about today works because I asked him to help me overcome my nervousness and fear when I interview people for a podcast. So, out of that discussion, I asked Dave to come back and talked to my listeners about what I learned from his experience. So, Dave, we all know about stressful situations, but I want you to first talk about what physically happens in our body when we're under duress and what's going on and happening to us in stressful situations.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Actually, I didn't realize it until you told me what was going on, and I had that eureka moment. So share that with our listeners, please.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to. And kind of along the lines of with what you said, I want people to realize it's nothing wrong with them. It's a physiological response in the body, and it can't be completely controlled. There are things they can do to work past it and or to work with it, but it's going to happen in a lot of situations. In a lot of the jobs I've had, the situations where I faced this was either doing medical procedures or getting shot at and shooting back. Because what happens in stressful situations is the body does what we call an adrenaline dump. It dumps all this adrenaline into the system, and everybody's heard of the fight or flight. And basically, it puts you into fight or flight mode. And so, one of the first things you lose is fine motor skills. And so, the fine motor skills go, your hands may feel tingly. To be honest with you, where I encounter this the most with trying to help people nowadays is public speaking. Many people describe this to me with public speaking. They'll go up onto a stage and they'll get lightheaded. They'll kind of lose where they are. Their face gets flushed. I mean, mine's naturally that way, so that's not a problem I face. But for a lot of people, the face gets flushed, and you can see it all over their head. Um, they'll grab the bottle of water that's sitting on the lectern to try to get a drink, and they can't even unscrew the bottle cap. I mean, I've seen this happen with a lot of people. So the fine motor skills go. You're not entirely as sharp mentally as you normally would be because when you get in that situation, all your body wants to do is either punch something or run away from something. I like to use a bear as an analogy. You're either thinking, I need to fight that bear or run from that bear. And most of the time it's run. And so they just want to run off the stage because they don't know anything else to do. And so I've encountered this a lot with the jobs I've had because when we're shooting, when we're having to shoot at a target, one of the first things with the fine motor skills is you're going to lose the ability to aim correctly. And so we would start with a big target, bigger than man sized, and we would slowly move the target smaller and smaller, even until the point where we had a man sized target, but we would put 3x5 cards on the target in different places. And so that way, when you went into a scenario, you had to aim for a much smaller spot. And so you had to learn to control those reactions. Another thing, as far as fine motor skills go, one of the most common things we did on the ambulance or disasters is doing an IV. And when you're trying to stick a needle into a small vein in somebody's arm or their neck or somewhere else on the body, finding that little tiny vein with the small needle is sometimes not easy. And so when the fine motor skills go, and the last thing you want your patient to see is you shaking while you're coming at them with a large needle. And so you've got to learn to control that. And so here's a few tips that I've used in my own life and that I try to give other people to use in any situation. It doesn't have to be life threatening with people shooting at you or medical stuff. Public speaking, like I said, is a common one. So, one of the first things is overtrain. Anything that you're wanting to do where you feel this happen, overtrain. Do it as much as you can. If you're wanting to be a public speaker, for instance, speak in front of every single group you can get in front of, whether it's a podcast or live or just being on Zoom calls and practicing being more poised, kind of controlling your breathing, making sure your voice doesn't go too fast, or in the case of a lot of men, start squeaking like you're going through puberty all over again. You just try to slow down a little bit and overtrain until that can happen. One of the things we used to do is what I call hyper realistic training. For instance, when we were doing medical or shooting, things like that, we would have people yelling at us. We would have training partners. They would be off to the side and they would throw things at us. They would do anything they could think of to just shake us up. They'd call us names. I mean, sometimes they'd be brutal. And but what it did was it helped you to fight through all that, or it helped you focus even more on what you were doing because what you're doing is more important than what they were trying to distract you from. So, overtrain, hyper realistic training, and roll with it. That's the last thing I say. Is the last tip is to roll with it. Going back to public speaking, my biggest fear when I'm on a big stage at a conference is that I'm going to stand up there to speak, and at the last minute, I'm going to split the back of my pants. That's just, or as a man, I'm going to stand up there and my zipper's going to be down. And the thing is, the split pants thing actually happened to me one time. And so I say, just roll with it. I had a coat with me, and the coat was just long enough to cover that up. And so I rolled with it. I did my speech. I rocked it out because there's no point in doing a public speech if you can't rock it out. But I tell you, normally I like to walk around on stage and I'll turn around and I'll do things all over the stage. I didn't turn around at all. I had to fight that urge. And so I rolled with it. I didn't turn around. I rocked it out and then just kind of backed my way off the stage instead of walking off to the side. And so that's the three tips I can give you. Just practice, 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 practice more realistic than what the actual event's going to be. And if you screw up or something bad happens, I have missed many an IV for different reasons on the ambulance. I couldn't find the vein. I went through the vein. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with such a simple procedure. You know what? Find another vein, put the IV there. So just keep rolling with it.
That's some really great advice. Overtrain, and the second one was called hyper
Hyper
real
realistic.
okay, hyper realistic, and then roll with it. I'm sure hyper realistic, you could get a couple of friends in there and they could really have some fun with that to challenge to
Oh,
really
yeah.
challenge somebody to stay focused. Obviously, it produces good outcomes because you guys wouldn't train with that method if it didn't really work. What are some other crazy things that you've done to help you confront and face your fears that you might have about doing something new? Can you share a few experiences with us?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I like to do with new experiences, especially things that scare me, is to just jump headlong right into it. I'm afraid of heights. And so I started rock climbing. And from there, I went into mountain climbing. And my fear of heights never went away. I think it turned more into a healthy respect for heights and the things that would keep me safe when I'm up high. And so it made me really focus on knot tying and the safety of the gear, things like that. And so, yeah, I just jumped headlong into it. I got training. And so, find experts in what you want to do, get the training you need. And you may never not be afraid to do it, but I don't want that to keep you from doing it.
You bring up a good point too. So you're still afraid to do climbing, but you sought out information. The point I would just want to pull out of that is that knowledge is an antidote for fear. Would you say that that's been true in those situations when you've had to face something? The knowledge, I mean, you still have that fear that's there. I think we all deal with that. There's no tried and true remedy to actually eliminate fear. Or is there? Is there a way to eliminate fear?
Yeah, I don't think there's a way to eliminate it. I mean, there may come a point when you're no longer afraid of that thing, but there's always gonna be another thing that you're afraid of, and often just because it's new. One of my mentors that I used to work with rock climbing, not only did he teach me how to climb and the knots and things like that, but he actually made us train on self-rescue. And so, in other words, plan B, if something happened, is I knew how to rescue myself off the mountain.
Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else? I know you have a few other examples. Do you have any fun, out of the ordinary examples of things that you did to confront your fears?
Yeah, I mean, I love speaking, public speaking, whether it's keynotes or training, teaching first aid, anything like that. The thing of it is, I'm still afraid of that, and that's why I started speaking. Was I started teaching classes because I figure I enjoy it, and it still scares me to death. I still get nervous every time I go up in front of a crowd. But the thing is right as I'm getting ready to go up on stage, that's like go time. That's like the space shuttle has launched. There's no going back, and just a sense of calm comes over me, and I love that feeling because it's like an adrenaline rush, but it's a calm adrenaline rush. It's more of a, let's call it a confidence rush, because it's just all of a sudden I am in my element. I'm practiced. I know what to do. If I screw up, I've got a plan B. And if I screw up bad enough, I can always just run off the stage. And there's always an escape. I mean, I could rescue myself by just running off the stage, and maybe these people will never see me again. And so it gives me a confidence that just to go out there and do what I know that I'm qualified to do.
Yep, that's just a prime example again of knowledge is the antidote to fear. And there's always a plan B. Thanks for taking the time to come back on and share with us some tips for conquering our fears. So, overtrain is number one. Number two is hyper realistic situations. And the third is just to roll with it and accept the outcome. And I would throw a fourth one in there is just know yourself well and have a plan B. So, Dave, I want to thank you for coming back on the podcast today. I'll put information down in the show notes for everybody where they can reach out to you. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, no, just anytime you get a new opportunity, a new situation, I love those. So I encourage you, just go try it. If you don't like it, don't do it again. But if something new comes up, don't be afraid to try it.
All right. Perfect advice. Go grab life large and just try that new thing. Thanks, Dave. You have a great day.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast. I value your time with me because I realize you could be listening to someone else right now. If you got any value or think someone else can benefit from what you heard, please spread the word, hit subscribe, and check out my website at www.suesaller.com. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps and make today awesome, friends. Have a great day and God bless.